cocinarista cook. We are going to do a basic apple pie, pumpkin pie crust. It's a basic crust. There's many varieties of crust out there. There's some that you can mix egg in it. There's some that you can mix chocolate in it, but many varieties of crust. To start off with, some 2.5 cups of unbleached flour. Unbleached flour is my staple in this kitchen. Many people use a food processor to make their crust. I find that a food processor, if you overblend a crust, it will not be flaky. I use the old pie crust mixer here. 2.5 cups of flour. An unbleached flour is a staple here. 2 teaspoons of sugar. A teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. 4 tablespoons of vegetable shortening. Now, of course, you can pulse this in a food processor. I find food processors overwork the pie crust and makes them sometimes not as flaky. Remember, you want a very nice flaky pie crust. Work this in. I'm going to work this in till it's a little bit mealy. See? And then we're going to put in 12 tablespoons of the butter, unsalted butter, or you can use buttered flavor shortening. And now we're going to incorporate 12 tablespoons of unsalted butter or flavored shortening. I always use the shortening one. Makes it for a nice flaky dough. And we're going to cut this in with our pastry cutter. Again, if you do a food processor, you have to be careful with a food processor, for you do not want a tough crust. Tough crust ain't as sweet, loses its flexibility. A lot of people buy homemade crust. Don't buy homemade crust. It has a flavor of some type of preservative, which I'm sure is not even food. It takes a few minutes, and you can do it days in advance. Thanksgiving is actually next week. I'm making a bunch of pie crusts now. This makes 2 pie crusts, and then I'm going to refrigerate them. I put a sticky on each pie crust so I know which one I'm using for what. This will be for my apple pie, and then I'm going to repeat this process again for my pumpkin pies. As you see, it's taking shape into pea-sized dough. So it's becoming more of a dough. See, it's taken more of a dough shape. Quarter cup or 4 tablespoons of ice water. You're going to add a quarter cup or 4 tablespoons of ice. Put into the flour that has all the shortening. Look at that. See? Your dough is finally taking shape. If you do it in a food processor, just be careful. You don't want to make it tough. Even when you're doing it by hand, be careful. Don't want to make it tough. We're now going to drizzle this in. With a knife, you're going to cut it. So you don't want to overwork it. And now we're going to separate it into 2 discs, wrap it in saran wrap, and refrigerate it. So now we have the dough ready to break into 2. Get a little flour in between your fingers, not too much. We got the right texture here. As you see, it's a nice, beautiful bowl of dough that's not overworked. Again, if you do food processor, I'm not saying you don't have to, just pay attention to it. I do it on plastic wrap because then you don't have to go crazy with the counter. Look at that. It's like a big ball of Play-Doh. And that's actually the texture. So, if you want to make an even cut, make it into a ball, cut it in half. What I do is I put one down and I flatten it. So when I take it out, it won't be as hard to flatten it out. Now, remember, each disc make a pie, like pumpkin pie, or the whole recipe makes your apple pie. And I flatten it down. And then, just to make my life easier, this will be my apple pie. I saran wrap the two together, like so. Make a note. Paste the tape and write apple pie. There. So this is my apple pie crust, ready for next week. I always make my apple pie the night before Thanksgiving because I cook it and let it cool and leave it out in room temperature. The pumpkin pie I'll probably make Monday night, the pecan pie Tuesday night, and you got some pie crust ready for your festivities or for whatever. And then we'll show you how to do a pumpkin pie and an apple pie and a pecan pie. Many ways of enjoying the festivities. You gotta have your pies. Enjoy!